Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of Utes. I am your host, Sammy Mora, and as always, I am joined today by the lovely Cole Bagley. Cole, how are you doing today?
Good, Sammy. Really good. I mean, it's a bittersweet because Utah football is over for the year 2020, but we ended on just a really good high note, 3 straight wins. It was a great second half for Utah yesterday.
Let's talk about how the last 24 hours to 48 hours have been for the program as a whole. Because you beat Wazoo in a come from behind victory, and then last night you get a massive quarterback transfer from Texas in Jaquaden Jackson, huge for the program, 4 stars, and then it happened again this morning. Charlie Brewer from Baylor announced he is transferring to Utah for his final year. That's huge for this program. Talk about a massive 48 hours.
Oh yeah, no, Sam, we were talking about this a little bit beforehand, but I just think, Utah has not been a program that's been used to having such a deep roster of quarterbacks. But look at the great programs in college football. Look at Alabama, look at, Clemson, all of the great programs. They usually have a lot of guys competing for that number 1 spot because the program's respected, they're successful. People want to come and play for, and be a part of that culture. And they're willing to not only compete for it, but for some of the new freshmen, they're willing to maybe redshirt or sit for a year or two and then have their opportunity. So it's just very telling of the direction that the University of Utah is headed as far as recruitment and just putting together a great roster.
Yeah, and also these kids are going to learn a lot. Peter Costelli and Cooper Justice and Jackson are going to learn from Charlie Brewer. Played for Baylor for 4 years. 11-1 in 2019. Took him to the Sugar Bowl. He's a good quarterback, and these guys are going to learn from him, and this is going to be something that benefits Utah in the long run. You have the success, and Utah is now starting to be able to pull that weight and have that brand to be able to bring in these good transfers and stuff. And be worried all you want about the quarterback situation at Utah. I think Cole and I can both agree on this one when I say Drew Lisk, as much as we love him, and we will talk about him momentarily, he's not going to be back next year. Whittingham said he has 3 degrees already. Football is not his aspiration, and I wouldn't be surprised if we hear after the team meeting on Tuesday that Lisk is hanging it up because sometimes this is not what guys want. They just want to get their education, and that's what they do. And then I think Jake Bentley is probably seeing the writing on the wall. When you get you're hopping off the Bentley train.
Well, I tweeted out yesterday a GIF or GIF, however you want to say it, of Harry Potter on the train leaving Hogwarts as a sign of I'm off of his train. And I was temporarily on the Drew Lisk train yesterday, but
I think
we'll figure out what train I get on.
We were all on the Drew Lisk train last night, okay?
Exactly.
But I think Bentley has seen the writing on the wall, whether he goes and puts his name in the NFL draft or he just calls it a career, I think his time at Utah is over. I think we've seen the end of the Jake Bentley era. Next year, will we be in the Cam Rising era? Will we be in the Charlie Brewer era? Will we be in the Jaquaden Jackson era? Who knows? But what we do know is that yesterday, we owe a lot of thanks and gratitude to one Mr. Drew Lisk. A lot of thanks, because that first half, I had PTSD.
Not team fun. That was not team fun.
That was team sadness.
Yeah.
That was team sadness.
Team depression, however you want to say it.
Team just get me out of there. When I was up in the press box, I had PTSD flashbacks of the USC game, which was the other game that I covered at Rice Eccles. I was like, oh my God, this isn't going to end well. This is whatever team we saw in Boulder, we weren't going to see last night or yesterday afternoon, whatever time you want to say it was. But also, can I just say that was the most 2020 thing to happen was Jake Bentley throwing the second longest touchdown pass in school history to Britton Covey. And then on the next drive, throwing an interception. And then on the following drive, being benched. That is the most 2020 sequence of events I've ever seen. And I think the coaches were kind of like, yeah, this is not good. What would have happened here? I'm gonna toss that to you, Cole. What would have happened if we would have played Drew Lisk against Washington?
I think the season may have gone quite a bit differently. Bentley, and we talked about this before the show. I think SEC wide receivers are a lot better than Pac-12 receivers. The stats, if you look at Jake Bentley's stats, they were really good when he was at South Carolina.
They were very promising. They gave Utah fans some hope that we were going to have a really good quarterback, like 1,000-yard passing quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, he was over 2,000 yards, I believe, for 2 of his seasons at South Carolina. I think one of the seasons he threw like 28 touchdown passes and only like 11 interceptions. But yesterday in the last game, and he did this a lot all season long, constantly underthrowing receivers, putting them in bad situations. Covey took a couple of really ugly hits that were 100% at the fault of Bentley because he was throwing into, right into pressure, putting the ball in an unsafe place. And Witt, I think Coach Witt had just had it. And it's unfortunate that it took so long to get to that point.
Exactly.
I do think, I mean, it may have just been the perfect storm, the perfect situation for Drew Lisk to come in and to win that football game. Washington State is not USC. They're not Washington. But it would have been interesting. We may have been looking at a 4-1 or a 5-0 season and competing for the Pac-12 championship. I think Bentley was the biggest problem, but we'll touch on that a little bit later.
We'll talk about that later, but I just want to say about this game on Saturday, one of the biggest things that stood out to me, especially in that post-game press conference with Ty Jordan, is he said that Witt literally told them at halftime, if you don't want to play for the next 30 minutes, stay in the locker room. And I think that really motivated this team. I think this team was like, yeah, we need to show up and show out. Because, first of all, there was family in the stands this time. There was family in the stands for both Utah and Washington State yesterday.
Right.
That was the only time that these family members were able to see these guys play all year, live. And I think that they didn't want to go out this way, like especially considering that Utah opted out of playing a bowl game if they became eligible on Friday morning. They opted out. They said if we win tomorrow, we're not going to play a bowl game. So we all knew going into this game that this was the last time we were going to see this team this year. And I think they were like, let's go out on a high note. Let's take that momentum and let's try and put it towards spring football and a 2021 season and see if we can get the gears grinding, because majority of this team, in my opinion, will be back next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, just to kind of touch on yesterday's game, it was disastrous in the first half. Washington State had 28 points, 288 yards, 188 in the air, 18 minutes of possession in the first half compared to Utah's 7 points. They did have 250 yards, but their 3 turnovers just negated those yards. It's as if they didn't even happen because they couldn't do anything. And only 11 minutes of possession. So Wazoo had the ball for 2/3 of the first half. But like you said, Coach Witt's halftime speech changed the what they were thinking, and then obviously bringing in Drew Lisk and replacing Bentley was huge. But right before the half, Washington State quarterback Jaden DeLara put up the U and then broke it on his knee. This will be the beginning of the end for him as he disrespected the U. Bad choice, young gun. Terrible choice. Shouldn't have done it.
I didn't even know that happened until I saw it on Twitter because someone had put it out and said, like, Jaden DeLora broke the U over his knee. And I remember texting you and I was like, did you see it? And you were like, no. And then I found the video and I sent it to him.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Don't disrespect the U.
And I didn't see that. It was right before halftime. But, you and I were going back and forth texting. And I texted you and I said, look how cocky Washington State looks right now going into the locker room. I mean, it looked like the game, like it looked like they thought the game was over, which to many of us, we thought the same thing. But there was still 30 more minutes of football to be played. There were still 2 more quarters, a complete second half, and Utah showed up and came to play.
Yeah.
38 unanswered points, 279 yards in the second half. Lisk was great, 15 for 26. He wasn't flashy, but he didn't commit a single turnover.
He got the job done.
He played conservative, but he played strong. He hit his receivers. He made, they had much better third down conversion rates in the second half. and they put together a bunch of drives and they scored. I think they scored on just about every single drive except for one in the second half.
It was really nice.
It was fantastic. I was really depressed at halftime, and then I was cloud nine as soon as the game ended.
Oh,
I mean, and the cherry on the top was Clark Phillips intercepting the ball and running it back on his birthday.
On his birthday. It was also Nephi Sewell's birthday yesterday, and he had the fumble.
I didn't know that.
I learned that last night. I said, wow, happy birthday, guys. But I will say, also the defense looked a lot better from the first half to the second half. That first half, that delayed handoff was killing us.
Yep.
Murdering us. And then Scally did his Scally magic, and we got a good defense.
Well, and I think Sammy, just to kind of finish it, I think a lot of it had to do with Drew Lisk. I think his leadership. I think he came in, the offense scored a touchdown. Not on their first drive, but on the second drive, they're able to put some points on the board. It went from a 3-possession game to a 2-possession game. 28-7 is very different from 28-14, and he instilled confidence in not only the offense but the defense. And the defense was just they were playing like you would expect a Utah defense to play, high in confidence, and everybody wanted it. Every single player. So many guys had 5+ tackles in yesterday's game.
And this is something that Drew Lisk is known for. Drew Lisk has been a team player. He's been on the team for 5 years now, and he's been that guy. I remember the Heart of Dallas Bowl. Troy Williams purposely took his shoe off in the game so that Lisk, who was a walk-on at that point, could take a snap during the bowl game. If that doesn't show that this team respects him and likes him and knows that he's put in his hard work and his time and his effort, I don't know what does. But I digress. Drew Lisk, we love you. Big stands, big fans.
Great story. Great way to often, a victory performance in a comeback game off into the sunset. Best of luck with whatever you choose to do.
It was a great way to cap off a career for him. It was a brief career, but if you can't, he became a hero.
Yep.
Last night for us. Okay. Anywho, let's talk about what was the lows for Utah this season. We've touched on the big one, which is Jake Bentley. And we touched on it. We were talking about this, like we said, we were talking about it pre-show, is Bentley's numbers, I think, look so good because he had SEC receivers. Like, I'm not saying that he's not a good quarterback because he had good moments. That touchdown to Covey yesterday was an example of that. And I think that he got into his head a little bit. He started rushing. I think he didn't trust in his offensive line. Like, I'm not saying you need to sit in the pocket as long as you humanly can, but you need to let things develop and you need to give it time. And I feel like he was rushing stuff all season long. One of my biggest things I had issues with Bentley this year was how exposed he left his receivers.
Yep.
He always threw them either behind the receivers, hard to get, or he put them in dangerous positions. And I think Britton Covey was one of the people who got put in the dangerous position the most. And I think you can put Brant Keithy in the overthrown category all the time because there was probably, I would say, 28 points that could have been scored this season by Keithy that weren't scored because of Bentley misthrowing the ball and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Bentley was kind of the biggest issue. But I will say the other thing that was kind of, it's not bad, it's more inconsistent to me, was when this team was good, they were good. They were, look at the Colorado game. They were good. They were
for the first half against Washington and the second half yesterday.
Good. Yeah, when they're good, they are good. But when they are bad, they looked terrible. Enter the USC game. Enter the second half of the Washington game. Enter the first half of the Washington State game. And yes, that's to be expected because you have such a young team that doesn't have this big game time experience. But I think that as the season went on, I'll touch on this a little bit later, the season went on, the team got more and more confident and more comfortable with what they were doing. But I digress. I'm going to let you talk about Bentley because I know you have some strong feelings about this. So I'm going to let you take the reins on this one.
Yeah, so I mean, all preseason leading up to the season, I liked Jake Bentley.
Captain of the Jake Bentley Express.
Yeah, and I'll own up to that. But I thought that he had the numbers to back it up. I mean, multiple seasons over 2,000 yards. One season, I think, with 28 touchdowns. His numbers looked good, and when you have an opportunity to bring in an SEC senior transfer, you should expect a lot. And he just let us down and turned into a nightmare. I mean, he seemed uncomfortable. I don't think his chemistry was very good with the offense. I mean, there were several times where he was making the wrong play. Where, I think, obviously when you run a pass play, you're going to have a receiver that play is set up to target them.
Mm-hmm.
But the beauty of it is there's 3 or 4 other receivers, and if one of them is open, you don't have to pass to that guy. And it just seemed, you watch his eyes, you watch his body language. A lot of the time, I felt like he would not look at the other receivers. There was one play in particular yesterday.
Oh my God.
I think Covey was the target.
And Solomon
is wide open, jumping in the air, waving his hands. I think it's a 3rd down, and he still
Bentley tucks it and runs, and is short.
He's wide open, and there's 10 to 15 yards between Solomon and any Wazoo defender, and he didn't even look at him, and just tucks it and ends up going short. And so it just was really frustrating.
That's not the first time that's happened this season either. That has happened multiple times, and it's mainly happened to Solomon and Samson and Brian, and it happened to Brant a couple of times too. The only people that Bentley felt comfortable throwing to majority of the season, and Ty Jordan. He started to get a little bit more confidence in Brant towards the tail end of the season, but Brian Thompson was underutilized. Solomon Enos was underutilized. Samson Nakua was underutilized because he wasn't going through his progressions, and it's very frustrating. And
so Bentley, 6 touchdowns on the season, 6 interceptions, and a handful of fumbles. That's terrible. I mean, I know that we only played 5 games.
You have 1 touchdown and 1 interception per game.
Our freshman running back, Ty Jordan, had as many touchdowns as a senior SEC transfer quarterback. That's disgusting. And so, we know, no doubt in my mind, that we beat Washington State because he was replaced by Lisky. Great coaching decision by Witt. I just wish it would have been done sooner. The season may have looked a little bit different. Can't change the past. Can we move on? I do think Bentley is done, though, regardless if he decides to come back or not. And that's good. We've got a whole, we talked about earlier, there's a whole bunch of new quarterbacks headed to the U, which is going to create
and all of them will be here for spring ball, which is huge. But I just want to say this also. I don't think Jake Bentley played a full football game for Utah this entire season. Like, he had good quarters and he had good moments, but he did not play a full football game. We can't talk about the whole team not playing a full football game because at least I can say the defense played probably 1.5 full games.
Right.
You can probably make an argument about that. You can probably make an argument for maybe 2 full games if you take quarters that they were really good and quarters that they were bad and add it all together. Jake Bentley probably did not play a full good game in his entire career here at Utah, his short career at Utah.
Yeah.
You would have good quarters. The only thing that I would say is even close to it is the Colorado game, with the exception of that god-awful interception he threw, where he overthrew Brian Thompson, and then he claimed that his hand got hit as he was throwing the ball. Which, if you watch the replay back, his pinky gets grazed, and he's like, and it's like,
right.
No, you just overthrew BT by not only a couple of yards, but also a couple of feet. Like, BT is tall, but I'm pretty sure BT can't jump 9 feet in the air to grab this ball that you threw. Right.
Well, on his interception yesterday, that was...
What was he looking at?
Next to the Covey pass that he had, that was like the most accurate pass he threw, but it was right at a Wazoo. It literally, he could not have placed that ball any more perfectly to be intercepted. I mean,
he did that multiple. He did that multiple times this year too.
It's like he locked eyes with the Wazoo defender and was like, "You're getting this," and just threw it right to him.
So, I just can't. And like, people were like, "Oh my God, Britton Covey has so much speed on that 91-yard pass, on that 91-yard touchdown pass." The thing is, I think is you can see Britton kind of slowing down a little bit as he beats the Wazoo defender, and I think it's because Bentley underthrew the ball, which I think is the most consistent thing we've seen all season from Jake Bentley's underthrown balls.
Yep.
But
So he was
whatever.
the biggest low, and to just and Sammy, I know you disagree with this. I don't think we got a full 60-minute game of Utah football all season. I know, you can look at the Colorado game. I just don't think the first half was quite at par, especially that second quarter. They were getting just completely trashed by who's the wide receiver? Is it Rice?
Which one? They had like two that were saucing on it.
It's the former NFL player.
Oh, Jerry Rice's son, Brandon. Yeah.
Yes. I think Utah got toasted by him, especially there in that second quarter. It was 21-10, and it was only 21-10 because Colorado made a big mistake. It should have been a 21-7 game at halftime. So I don't think that we saw a full 60 minutes out of Utah all season long.
I think the Colorado game was a full 60 minutes. It was the closest thing to a full 60 minutes. It might have been like a 58-minute game or like a 55 or something like that. But that was the closest game we had to full 60 minutes from Utah this year. And again, I bring back the youngness of this team. They are not used to playing in these high pressure moments. And to be completely honest, in high school football, if you get a huge lead, you can kind of let off the gas because you can assume that sometimes your opponent won't come back. And I think that is very evident in the Washington game is they got up 21-0 and they were like, we're done. We got this. We got this in the bag. They were still in that high school mindset. And I think that was something that got slapped out of them rather fast. So, but what's the bad? There also comes the good. And there was, as awkward this season has been and how boring and sad it was at other times, not boring, I shouldn't say that. The season was anything but boring. But as weird as this season was, there was still some really good moments. I think one of my biggest highs of this season was the growth from this team from game to game. So I know we talked about not playing a full game. So you see USC, you probably have a good quarter. Not even that probably. You have probably like a good 10 minutes, okay? Right. Then Washington, you have a full half. And then Oregon State, you have 3 quarters. And then Colorado, you have nearly a perfect game. And then yesterday we kind of regressed a little bit and we went back to the Washington era. Yeah. But I think that's a huge thing that this team got was this growing from game to game to game because they are so young and because they were so inexperienced, even if they weren't freshmen. Like Vontae Davis, huge. He had a huge year in that secondary. He had 2 interceptions, I'm pretty sure, off the top of my head. He had 2 interceptions. He had 53 yards off those interceptions. Like, he's a senior, but he hadn't been taking those reps. But he showed up and he showed out. And I think that's one of the biggest things that this team can take from this is one of the highs is that they grew. They had their moments where they had their good moments and they had their bad moments. And that's what you should expect from a young team like this. And that's very indicative of what this future for this Utah program looks like is the future is really bright because if we can get like the Colorado team, the team that played against Colorado mixed with the team that played the second half versus Washington State mixed with the team who played against Washington, the rest of the Pac-12 won't know what hit them. And I think one of those big things that's going to help it is if we get a quarterback, if we can get a good quarterback who can get into the system and work. And yes, also our offensive line was banged up this year. Orlando Umana missed like every game except for the first one, which he only played like a good chunk of it. And if we can get Umana back in that offensive line, put Nick Ford back to where he was originally supposed to play at the beginning of the season, that offensive line is a lot sturdier. I will give extra props, though, to Nick Ford because he played fantastic as center for the good majority of the season, especially against that Colorado game where it was snowing and he was snapping the ball with ice on it.
Yeah. I mean, this season almost didn't happen, was almost delayed until spring. Super weird, and it was unfortunate that we had a shortened schedule. No one's disagreeing with that. But I think this season went about as well as it could have, looking at what it did for the future. So you talked a lot about growth from game to game. I don't think anybody did that better than Ty Jordan.
Oh, yes.
I think game to game, he just got exponentially better each and every game. So to just quickly go over his stats, USC, 7 carries, 32 yards, 1 reception, 21 yards. It was the running back committee very much so, and they kept turning the ball over. So not as many in that USC game.
And you can't fault him for that.
Right. He's redshirt, or he's a young freshman, and so
he's just doing what the coach is asking.
Exactly. Moving on, Washington 10 carries, 97 yards, 4 receptions for 31. Oregon State 27 carries, so 3 times as many, almost 167 yards and a touchdown, 2 receptions, 22 yards. Colorado 17 carries for almost as many yards as against Oregon State, 147, 2 touchdowns, 2 receptions for 19 yards. Washington State, that kid balled out in the second half.
So good.
22 carries, 154 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 receptions for 33 yards. We need to stop comparing him to Zach Moss. He's not Zach Moss. He's Ty Jordan, and he is special, and he's going to do awesome things for this program. I'm so excited for him. I think he may be my favorite player now for the program. Do
I need to call Brant?
Yeah,
Do I need to call Brant and let him know?
You call Brant and break up with him for me.
Okay, no, I'm not going to do that. You can do that yourself. You are a grown man. You can break up with Brant yourself.
Okay, cool. I love Ty because he is a young gun, but he has a great work ethic. I think his football IQ is through the roof, and he's going to do awesome things.
I will say this really fast when you're talking about growth. I want to bring up Clark Phillips.
Absolutely.
From game to game. Like, against USC, the kid got burned. The kid got burned against USC. And I'm not going to, I don't think anyone's going to disagree. Like, he got pushed into the deep end starting week 1. But you got to look at how he's progressed throughout the season. He ended his season with a pick 6 on his birthday. That is fantastic. He finished the game.
They iced the game.
He iced the game, yeah. He finished the game with 25 total tackles, 2 TFLs, 1 interception, 2 pass breakups, and a fumble recovery. That is, if that doesn't show what the potential of this Utah secondary has, I don't know what does. And then you had JT Broughton, who also looked like a starter. Because he was a starter this year. 26 tackles this season. He looked good. I love Nate Ritchie. I'm sad that we're losing him for the next 2 years while he goes and serves his mission. But at the same time, this Utah secondary had growth. They grew from every single week, and they got better and better and better.
Well, and this is perfect going into my next point. I think the Utah defense exceeded expectations well beyond where anybody thought they would be, including Coach Whittingham, who in a press conference said, we were worried a little bit about this defense. I mean, they lost 9 starters, which is huge. And everybody thought the offense would be the strong point, the defense would be the weak point. The defense, I think, is what kept them in a lot of these games.
The defense kept Utah in the games. Like, we talked about this prior to the season. We said the Utah defense isn't going to keep Utah in the games. It's Utah's offense is going to keep Utah in the games.
Exactly.
No, it was the same. Why did we've said this before on the show, in Wit We Trust, why did we assume differently with this defense? Right. But whatever. You
mentioned Clark Phillips. Growth, game to game. You could see how he positioned himself, the way that he played receivers, and he would learn in game. And that he had so much to do with why they were so much better in the second half. He as well as the secondary got burned a lot in the first half. They made adjustments, and they were perfect in the second half.
Do you know if they moved from zone to man for the second half? I can't remember.
Sure. Devin Lloyd, absolutely spectacular. Stepped up big time as the upperclassman. I think if he chooses, he's going to be wearing an NFL jersey this next year. And I think any team is going to be lucky to have him. His football IQ as well is super high. He makes a lot of solo tackles. I think he had 4 tackles for loss yesterday.
So good. Lloyd finished the season, just to put it in perspective, as the leading tackler on the team. Okay, he had 48 total tackles, 10 TFLs for 39 yards, 2 sacks for 23 yards, 1 quarterback hit, and a forced fumble. He's a baller.
He's great.
Defensive MVP of the season right there.
Absolutely.
Actually, I want to give the defensive MVP award to the entire defense because they deserve it.
There you go. So my last point here. While the season was incredibly strange, we only got 5 out of 7 games. We only had 7 games scheduled. It provided great development for these players. Coach Witt talked about how all these young freshmen were thrown right into the thick of it. No out-of-conference games to ease into the college level. It was USC right from the start, and they handled it fairly well. wonderful experience for these young guys and especially with eligibility frozen, we could see some of these younger players for a little bit longer, which is great for the program. Utah football is going to be elite next season with the return of most of our weapons, the new guys that have committed, the new class, and 2 4-star QB transfers. Watch out, Pac-12. Utah's coming for the South, and they're coming for the chip next year.
Oh yeah, this Utah team is in very good hands. Very good hands. I will say that there's going to be, I think the biggest person that we're going to lose is Devin Lloyd. I'm not going to be surprised if he puts his name in the NFL draft because he does have those stats and those numbers from this season and last season. But, I'm not worried. I was a little worried about the linebackers, and Nephi Sewell was the second leading tackler on the team. I'm not worried about this. I don't get why I ever doubt Utah football because they always come out on top for me. But whatever. We digress. We can talk about this more next week because we are sadly out of time, which is really depressing. But before we leave, we want to just remind you guys, we are writing columns now through Sports Pac-12. You can follow them on Twitter at Sports Pac-12. Also check out their website, sportspac12.com. While you're on your computer or on your phone or whatever device you use to surf the internet, check out our website, sports.tv. You can find live videos from all of our clips. Our show is podcasted. You can listen to us if you don't want to watch us. You can read our columns on there as well, and then also follow us on social media at Sports TV on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. I'm sad. I'm sad the season's over. But,
But we will be moving to talking about basketball, which will be exciting.
Yeah, even though they got their game canceled for this week.
Yeah, but
the Rona got them. But we'll talk about that later. But as always, let's just give them a good go Utes, guys.
Signing out for that season, baby. Go Utes.